All right, let's make a formal introduction for our listener. Good afternoon, Steve. Good evening for you. My name is Claudio. I'm calling you from Washington, D.C. From the studios in Fairfax City. We're very humble and grateful that Steve Balsamo accepted our invitation to the show. Steve, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Claudio. I really appreciate the invite. I've watched a lot of your interviews and really enjoyed them. And as we were saying just before we come on air here, that I love that you've got so much passion for music and you've followed it up and done all these interviews. It's really, so hats off to you, man.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, and I never thought that something like this could be or would be possible to do it. During the pandemic, I was working from home. I'm a computer scientist, and I opened one online radio station. I sent the link to friends. They like it. I opened another one. Then a couple of companies asked me to see if I could put an interface to that. And then I thought, well, this pandemic, musicians are not touring. Everybody must be at home, or I would start calling people. And at the beginning, it was very hard. And eventually, I got a hold of Steve Hackett from Genesis, and he was my first one, and became good friends with him. And I got lucky along the way, man. So I'm very fortunate.
Listen, man, I think when everything stopped, and musicians and actors, they all want to talk about themselves. So yeah, I think you had a good audience at the right time.
All right, man. All right, so let's go back to the beginning. Were you born like in a musical family, and how old were you when you perhaps began taking piano lesson or guitar lesson? Or
no, I didn't even start doing any music until I was about 17. Although my mum could sing, and in Wales we have a tradition of Eisteddfods. They're like competitions where people sing and act and dance and so on. And she won a couple of those back in the day. I think she won a cup for singing as a duet.
Yeah.
My dad was Italian, and he could sing as well. He had a high tenor voice. So there was some music in the house. My mum was very into country music, and my dad was into opera and classical music. So, and when I look back on what I've done in my career, some of it's been kind of operatic based, and some of it's been country based. So obviously, by osmosis, I got what they liked. But there were no music lessons in our house. My brother formed a band. My brother Andrew is probably the one that's most responsible for my interest in being in bands. He started a band in school. We had a physics teacher called Peter Lewis in our school in Duneva in Swansea. And Peter had a Volkswagen van. He played guitar, and he encouraged my brother and his friends to form a band. And I remember at the time I was just painting backdrops because I love art and painting, and so I painted the backdrop of my brother's band. And at the gig in the local hall, all these girls turned up, and I thought, yeah, I think there's something in this singing. So that's when I had aspirations to start. So it was, women and really cheesy, obvious things to kind of gain attention from the opposite sex.
Yeah.
So then, that's how I started. But when I was in school earlier on, in the infant school, we call it here, I tried to audition to get into Joseph and His Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat musical in the school, and I had to sing "Morning Is Broken," and I couldn't, and I wasn't allowed to join the choir because the teacher said I couldn't sing. And that came full circle years later, because I told an interviewer once, after I'd been on the stage in the West End, I told an interviewer that story, and they tracked the teacher down. Her name is Mrs. Richards. She's a lovely woman. She denied ever saying it, obviously, but so we ended up on a TV program talking about it. So it was funny. So yeah, so a long story long, I didn't grow up musical. I didn't really have any aspirations to become a singer. It was watching my brother. But I think my life has been a series of strange coincidences, Claudio, that things have floated past my window. I've looked at it and thought, wow, that's interesting. And I've kind of followed that path. That's been all my life. And I'm still in that kind of, I love synchronicities and coincidences and things like that. So I've just followed that.
If you use the word synchronicity, I think you must know the Carl Gustav Jung, I suppose, right? So,
of course.
Yeah. All right. I'm a big admirer of him. And actually, I same like you, a lot of synchronicities. Well, we can talk about this, but Maybe somebody up there is moving up the dice, and we think we have free will to do
Maybe,
it. But
yeah,
maybe we don't.
maybe, and maybe we come in with a pre-organized plan or a pre-agreement. I don't
Right.
know, but all I can say is, over my life, there have been some amazing, very, very, very weird coincidences that have led me down different paths. Yeah,
Okay.
it's been interesting.
And then you mentioned that the equivalent here when kids finish the college high school, right? So you were 16, 17, you saw your brother playing,
Yeah,
trying to get all the girls and trying to get attention, and you say, man, here I am as well. When eventually you discovered that you could sing as well. I mean, people don't are born with a gift, right? So they're not used to it, but eventually you say, well, I can hit the right notes as well. I haven't received any training, but what was
yeah.
like?
Well, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and there was a lot of that heavy rock stuff. I'm very into heavy rock
Yeah.
still. The music I make now is very acoustic and kind of relaxed. I grew up listening to extremely kind of heavy metal, and all of the singers and in the kind of big hair kind of LA bands, they were great singers, man. All those people could sing. And then I went through listening to Ian Gillan of Deep Purple and Robert Plant and Paul Rodgers and all these amazing singers, and I tried to listen to them and tried to sing like them. And what happened was, I by listening to these singers, I almost kind of learned from them. That was the schooling that I had, and I figured out that I had a wide range and I could sing high notes and stuff like that. So the band that I joined, the first band, we did a load of heavy rock covers, as you do. Where I'm based in South Wales, it's my town of Swansea. It's had a history of great singers and great musicians and great poets. Dylan Thomas came from here, and we've had bands like Man and Badfinger came from this area. Badfinger, who wrote Without You. Bonnie Tyler lives just down the road.
Wow.
Michael Sheen and Richard Burton, the actor, were just up the road, and Anthony Hopkins, although he lives in LA now, comes from 5 or 6 miles away. So where I live is this amazing creative kind of meeting place. Many kind of rivers cross of creativity. So we've always been blessed. So anyway, so I just started listening to great people and got in a band with some good people, and we just experimented and we just learned. And this was obviously way before the TV shows, Finding Stars and whatever, and the Pop Idols and American Idols and whatever. So in the old days, we used to, get in a room, try and learn some chords, sing some songs, get out and play. So it was basically that. So over, a year or two, I realized that I could sing, and then another strange coincidence happened. I was in art school, and I heard my friend needed to audition to get into a performing arts college in a place called Neath, just up the way. And he was a guitarist, and he wanted to play Bohemian Rhapsody. Jonathan, his name was. So he asked if I would sing Bohemian Rhapsody. So I went and auditioned for him. And the teacher, Alan Good, said, yeah, you sound great, Johnny. You sound good as well, Steve. Do you want to come in? So I left my art course, joined the performing arts course, and very quickly was surrounded by, some really great players. Again, a huge melting pot of great talent in this area. So I was there for about 6 months, and then I met a girl. She introduced me to some musicals and introduced me to a song called Bring Him Home from a musical called Les Miserables. I learned that to impress the girl's mother. And a couple of weeks later, I went for an open audition and I got in the touring production of that. So that was basically the beginning of my theatrical training. I got into it. I think it was the 1993 touring production of Les Mis, the first tour. So we went to Dublin and Edinburgh, and that was an amazing experience. But it wasn't what I really wanted to do. So I ended up, after that finished, coming back to Wales, and then putting another band together with a couple of players, writing songs, and because that's my real love is writing and composing. So we put a little band together, and then we started to release some stuff, and we got on some radio and all of that. And then a friend who was in Les Mis with me had become an agent, and he called me and said they were auditioning for the part of Jesus in Superstar. And the synchronicity of that was my brother called me that morning, and he said he'd heard something on the TV. And I thought, whoa, okay, this is interesting. And I knew at that point, Claudio, that I'd be in that show. I just knew it. It was a very, very strange. And during the 6 months that I was in the college, we did our own version of Jesus Christ Superstar. And at the last performance of that Superstar show, during the crucifixion, I remember thinking, I'm going to do this again. So yeah, so there's many more parts to that story, but that's basically how I started in this business.
Yeah, but a lot of questions there in between before you reach the age of 25. So, was any pressure from your family in terms of, hey, your older brother is into music, he's not going to make any money, forget about music, it's very hard, go to school or, get a proper job, or it wasn't any pressure for that?
No, I was very lucky. My dad was a chef, and my dad, we came from a very working class family, very, very very humble family. My dad was from Venice, my mother was from Wales, very working class. We lost my dad a few months ago, but all through his life, he was a lifelong learner. He was very into philosophy and psychology and spirituality. So he was an autodidact. He taught himself all his life. He never went to college, but he was a lifelong learner. So he was keen for me to get an education, and I think in another life I'd have gone down some sort of academic route. But I came home one day and said, "Look, I'm going to sing." To my dad, I said, "I'm just going to sing. I don't know what that's about." And I know I'm jumping ahead, but I was telling a friend the other day, from that point and then being on the West End stage, it wasn't long. It was only a few years in between. And I remember my dad came to one of the very early performances, and afterwards I met him for beer, and he was like, "How do you do that? How have you learned to do that?" And I said, "I don't know, man. I don't know." So, but my point is, I came home one day and I said to my dad, "Hey, I'm going to sing," and he just went, "Yeah, okay." So there was some sort of conviction in my communication, and that the intention was there. So yeah, and yeah, there was no. Yeah, I was very lucky in that way.
Yeah, man, good for you, man. And so back then, you say, well, you were 17, 18 years old, and you saw, well, music is my calling, at the time, writing songs, singing, and no formal training to be in theater, which is very complicated. I mean, you need to have like a special, well, it's always a specific skill set, but be an extrovert, willing to put yourself out there, willing to become very emotional. Guys in general, I'm not in general, right? People are, women complain that the guys don't open up. Guys they are close to themselves. They worry just about football and chasing girls and stuff like that. And you need to have, to be in theater, you need to be open. You need to be, willing to be vulnerable, willing to put yourself out there, and it's difficult, I suppose, right?
It was, and I think these days, the young people coming out of colleges, they're so, the quadruple threats, quintuple threats. They can sing, dance, act, write, film, edit, do all this, so that. But I think back then, and we're talking like 30 years ago, it was a different thing. And, I was lucky. I was young, and then naivety of youth as well was a really strong factor in how far I took this. On paper, a guy who'd never had a singing lesson, a music lesson, or done anything in the arts. I'm shy, really. I'm an introvert. But I thought, well, I think let's see what we can do here. Let's have a laugh. And I had nothing to lose, right? Nothing at all.
Yeah.
And music had been such a, heavy music and rock music had been such a deep love of mine, and still is. It really is a deep love of mine that, it's like 4 chords and the truth, man. Let's just go and see what we can do. And that's basically what I've done. I've just just followed my nose, followed the synchronicities, and
Yeah.
try to have fun along the way. That's
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely. And you need to go for it. In my case, I'm like you. I'm very introvert, man. And now I'm talking to people all over the world and putting myself out there on the internet, uploading the interviews. And it's very simple. I mean, you have a goal, either you work hard to it or you don't, right? Nobody put a gun on my head. Hey, you need to do this music thing and this music podcast. Like, at the beginning, people were saying, man, you have like an accent. Nobody will listen to you. Yeah, it's true. You have a big music collection. My music collection is about, I don't know, 7,000, 8,000, whatever I have. You have a lot of music knowledge in your head, but study to do this kind of stuff. You have an accent. You are kind of introvert. And at the beginning, it was hard to I didn't know what to ask. And I say one day, well, either you want to do it or you don't. There's nothing in between.
Exactly.
You need to push yourself. And maybe the first 10 interviews were harder and learn the rhythm. And now that is like in existence life. You become better and better over time, I suppose, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think, and it's having a passion and believing, we're able-bodied. We're clever enough. Let's just have a go. What's the worst that can happen?
That's right.
That's it.
That's right. Sometimes people are sometimes people are, and I see that with my young son that turned 18, people are kind of afraid or are worried too much about failure, and they don't see that by failing, you learn a lot about yourself, and you stand up again, and then you go or you do it better, or you go to a different school. It's part of the process, part of human beings. No, people are not born with a skill set or whatever, or a profession, or being good at math, or not being good at math or school or that. You need life. It's about errors and mistake, and all of us do stupid stuff, and you get better, and you try to accomplish your goals. So
absolutely. I think what's different these days, though, Claudio, is that because everything is online, from or TikTok to Instagram and everything, that when people make mistakes, they're in the public domain or they exist somewhere. I think I made so many mistakes, man, but none of it. I just know them and the people who were with me at the time. But now I think it's a slightly different world. So I've got a young daughter. She's 17, and the way she looks at the world is a very, very different. She's got a bunch. Had a lot of different opportunities than I had, and yet there seems to be a reluctance to just take life by the scruff of the neck and just go for it. But everyone's different. And I think because it's a different time, I think it'll take different. With her, for example, it'll be a different time scale, I think, before she'll settle into a groove and see what's what. But again, very artistic, and like me, she's starting out in art school. So we'll see what happens with her.
Absolutely.
But as you say, man, I think just going for it and having an intention, and kind of focusing and bringing that in. I'd never read The Secret, but I'm very into the idea of manifestation and setting your mind and setting your goal in a certain direction. I think that, I know I'm an example of it. It does work.
That's right.
I visualized stuff and I saw stuff coming way before it happened. And I told this on a podcast only recently. When I was in art school, I remember having and this story is very, very weird, right? So I'm just going to start with that.
Yep.
In art school, I was doing a bit of artwork, and I remember the piece of artwork that it was. And I sat back in my chair like this, and I looked out the window, and I started to have this kind of daydream or awakened dream or a vision or something. And it went like this. In my dream, I was I walked into a room, and there was a window, and through the window was me. And there was a band setting up, and I was part of singers. And bear in mind, I hadn't started singing really at this point. So I think I just started playing in a band. And I was singing in a band, and then I realized Meatloaf came into this vision, and Meatloaf was talking to me in this band, right? And then it dissipated. I wasn't a particular fan of Meatloaf. I was into heavier rock at the time. I knew who he was, but and I appreciated the songs and how great they were and everything else, but I was never really a fan. And then it kind of dissipated. And I remember sitting back thinking, well, that's weird. A few years later, down the line, I was in one of the audition cycles for Superstar. We'll loop back now and I'll tell you how I got there. But I was in an audition cycle for Superstar. I was about 5 or 6 auditions in, and the audition was at Abbey Road Studios. So I go to Abbey Road and they showed me to Studio 3. And when I walked in the room, it was the room from the Vision 4 or 5 years before. And I'm looking through the window and I didn't see me. I saw, not Meatloaf, I saw Jim Steinman was there. Because Jim Steinman was writing a musical with Andrew Lloyd Webber at the time called Whistle Down the Wind. And I auditioned for Andrew and we played some stuff. And I remember having this, I nearly fainted because I had to sing this really high note. And I remember thinking, Jesus, what is going on here? And then Jim had me sing a couple of the songs that they were writing. And I ended up singing a load of the demos for the musical. It's another story. But then fast forward years later, only to a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I was invited out to Holland to see Ted Neely, the guy who played Jesus Christ in the film Superstar. And I went backstage and I met Ted and we had this, conversation about the part and the film. And I told him my story about the weird vision. And then I went to Abbey Road and I saw Jim. It wasn't Meatloaf, but it was Jim. And he went, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he stopped me and said, man, that's the craziest thing. He said, I was the backing singer of Meatloaf's band. And I was like, huh? So, and I never knew this. So when I was looking through the window, I was seeing myself, but Ted said, I was that guy. I was the backing singer in Meat's band. Yeah. Meat and I were from the same town in Texas. He said we were in Hair, the musical, when it first opened together. He went off and become Meatloaf. I went off to become a drummer in a band at the Sunset and the Rainbow in LA. I was, sowing trees and being like a gardener, landscape gardener in the day. I was up a tree in this guy's house and I hear, hey, Teddy. And I looked down, he said, and it was Meatloaf. He said, what are you doing cutting trees with a voice like that? Come in my band. So I was flipped out because it was almost like a weird thing within a thing, right? It was like a weird cycle within a cycle. So that was a funny conversation to have. But so I've always looked out for those strange coincidences and strange stories. I love them. I think a lot of us have them a lot, but we forget the kind of synchronicities in the stories. But I think they're a regular occurrence of being human. Anyway.
Yep. People, I think, and I know we'll talk about this, but from that dream to the first time you went to Abbey Road, 20 years later, you were in Abbey Road with
exactly
with
right.
that guy, and so it's just, your life, man, it's amazing. Something else, man. Yeah,
it's been trippy, and the Eric Woolfson thing. So what happened then was I ended up auditioning for Superstar, and I got into the cast of Superstar because what I wanted. So my friend became an agent, and he called me the day, and my brother said, they're looking for a Jesus, and I was like, I'm hearing something. What is this? I'm hearing this. And my friend Johnny, who'd become an agent, said, do you still sing that song Gethsemane? I said, yeah, I think I can still do that. He said, come to my house. I went to his house. I sang it for him. He was like, whoa, that sounds good. So he called the casting director of Andrew Lloyd Webber's company, a lovely guy called David Grinrod. I think he's still a casting director for a lot of Andrew shows now. And a week or two later, I'm in a room with David singing Gethsemane. He starts to cry. But going back when Johnny called David and said, if you see Steve, you're going to cast him, which was big talk because I'd done one tour in production of Les Mis and that was it. So I went, auditioned, and that began a cycle of a year-long process, 15 or so auditions later.
Wow.
I get the gig, right, which was huge, and there were big pop stars going for it and all sorts. And everybody in the cast was so good, man. So good. The cast was killer. And a load of RSC actors. The guy, Zubin Vala, who was playing opposite me as Judas, had just come from playing Romeo at the RSC, this beautiful classically trained actor who just happened to be an amazing piano player and a hell of a singer, you know, one of those sickeningly talented people. So he was really helpful in helping me just not be terrible. You know, I'd come with no acting training. There was a great director in this woman called Gail Edwards. She was fabulous, and just took me as this kind of piece of clay and kind of molded me into this thing. It was one of the best learning experiences of my life. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Anyway, did that and got a deal with Sony Records pretty much in the first couple of months, which was my kind of intention. As great as the part was, and as great as the play, as the musical was, and our cast was killer, it wasn't really my intention to carry on in theatre. So I ended up going with Sony and signing there and doing what I really want to do, is go around the world writing songs with some of the hit songwriters of the world, and doing that, which is what I got to do for a couple of years, you know. Then released a record, got dropped by Sony, you know. This is a, you know, whirlwind kind of thing. And then I was literally licking my wounds going, man, and I just started putting this band together called The Stories. And then I get a call from Eric Woolfson, who the guy who was making Eric Woolfson's demos is for the musical Poe, is an amazing drummer called Ralph Salmins. And Ralph was the drummer in the Superstar Band, which was a killer band, by the way, in the West End. So Ralphie had said to Eric, you want to give Bals a shout? He's good. So Eric gives me a call and he says, you know, and there was somebody else, I think with Eric, somebody else had said, hey, you want to give Steve Balsamo a call? And she was like, hey, again, he was going, hey, I've heard that name twice. That's a bit. So he gave me a call. We had a meeting. I remember meeting Sally Woolfson, who you interviewed recently, who's a gorgeous person. So I went up to Eric's. He was living in a lovely house in Mill Hill in North London at the time. So I go around there, and I'd listened to a load of the Alan Parsons Project stuff, but I was into much heavier stuff than that, right? Although I appreciated it, and Eric's songwriting was so sublime and so clever, so very, very clever, tricky, and amazing words, and amazing, you know, just very, very clever. And I loved Old and Wise. I love Colin Blunstone. I think he's one of the best singers of all time, in my humble opinion, and one of the nicest people as well. I've got to meet him a few times. And I remember saying to Eric, man, that song Old and Wise, and he told me what the song is about, right? And so yeah, and he said, look, I'm putting this album together. Would you help me put some songs together? So we ended up going to Ralph's house, and his lovely studio. He's got a studio in his back garden, and we putting these songs down. And one of the first things we did was Immortal. Eric had a little demo of Immortal. I remember hearing it going, holy shit, man, that is a tune. So we worked on it, and you know, I helped. You know, I didn't write it, but I helped him kind of. I'd say, oh, well, I'd go here, and I'd go high here, and you know, and all that sort of stuff. And that's one of my favorite things I've ever sung in my life, man. There's a thing from Rotterdam at the Ahoy. I was asked to sing Gethsemane from Jesus Christ Superstar and Immortal from Poe. Yeah, and the Gethsemane thing, because of the Jesus Christ Superstar, you know, fans of that's had a lot of views, man. But if you want to hear a tune that really kicks, check out Immortal. It's a hell.
Eric Woolfson have unparalleled ability to write that kind of. I mean, some people I don't know, like Messi in the soccer world, right? Some people are born to be a star because one after another, you know, it's kind of Alan Parsons was kind of the front office running the show, and you know, Eric was writing music, the lyrics, and it's amazing. And many of the lyrics, Sally was telling me that kind of ambivalent. It's up to you or me or whatever, the listener, the writer, the person who composed the music to interpret. So what do you mean by, well, what he will say, what do you think it means? What it means to you? So
Oh, he was an
subliminal message under the lyrics, right? So
he was an absolute master of,
yeah.
It sounded much simpler than it was. It's not simple at all.
No. Yeah.
The lyrics, as you say, they're very layered and cryptic and symbolic, and he was into Freud, obviously, very much. So there was a lot of that psychoanalytical stuff and bubbling underneath all of his work. But listen, hanging out, aside from all of that, he was one of the best fucking funny people I've ever met in my life.
Good for you, man.
He was the funniest, most generous guy, very, very generous man. Man, I had so many laughs with Eric, and he was a terrible dancer. And when he would do this thing, right, we'd be listening back in the studio, and he'd do this kind of weird dance where he'd do this thing across the floor terribly. I'm a terrible dancer, and he was worse than me. Man, I laughed so hard. And then we got to record. So we did a bunch of demos for the Poe thing. And, I wasn't aware of, because there are so many fans and so many fanatical fans. I ended up singing with John Lord from Deep Purple a few years ago. And it's sacrilege to sing any of Ian Gillan's stuff, even if you're doing your own thing. And, but similarly, I remember seeing something online where we did God, I'm jumping back and forth, but when I'm thinking about it, we did a thing, I think it was in Holland, in North Holland somewhere, a radio show. You could see it online, where Eric had asked me if I do Eye in the Sky. And I'm like, are you sure, Eric? Because, I think some fans are going to go off their nut. And he was like, no. And he used to call me dear boy. Hey, dear boy, I think, I think you should do it. I'm like, okay. So we sang it, and it's a lovely version, it's a lovely. And I read some of the comments the other day, because I knew we were going to be talking, and I just went back and I was like, oh, geez, people going, how dare, who does he think he is singing these songs? And I want to write and go, well, Eric asked me. I didn't want to do it. He asked me to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So there's factions of fans that kind of get a bit territorial, which I understand, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But so we did a bunch of demos at Ralph's place, and then we took them in with Hayden Bendel into Abbey Road, which was a massive thrill for me. Having been there a few years before, and I remember saying to myself, I'm going to come back and record you at some point. So we were in there, tracking away, and we were in the big, we were in all the studios, 1, 2, and 3. So it was such a thrill, man.
Good. Yeah.
Some of the great players on it. Who played? It was John Paracelli playing guitar, and it was on bass. Lawrence Cott was on bass, and Ian Thomas, I think, was on drums. Just a killer band,
Good for you.
Those amazing players.
Funny, it's another funny thing that you mentioned Abbey Road. When I began this podcast exactly 2 years ago, and I go to England, very often for work or for music-related events. I remember I went twice to Abbey Road, and and I remember it's like a gate, and I go to the record store also that is to the right, and what's that guy in the gate is, I'm nobody. I just like music, and I just began doing a podcast, and it's possible for me to go to the main door, no inside the main door, and take a picture under the sign that Abbey Road Studios. No. And then 3 months later, back in April or so, I went back to London to see the last 3 shows of Genesis, because I'm a big Genesis fan, and I went back to Abbey Road, and can you let me in? I want to take a picture. I don't need to go inside. I'm not a musician. I'm not a famous person. The guy said, no. It's okay. No. And now, 2 years later, a publishing company pinged me recently to see if I'm interested in doing because I'm going to be interviewing and have interviewed kind of a lot of famous people, and you included, and there are more coming in the pipeline, to see if I want to do like a book or some kind, and take the kind of the transcript for all the interviews I have done, and put in a book and so forth. So and I say yes, and it will go to charities. I don't need the money. I have done okay. I want to do it because musicians like yourself have given me 2 hours of the time, to talk to a stranger or across the pond or so. Anyway, so I'm going to be putting the book together, and this week I'm going to be sending an email to Abbey Road, the head person, say, listen, I'm writing the book. I want to take a couple pictures. I want to go inside. This is my podcast. This is the radio. This is the
Yeah.
publishing company. So very likely now that 2 years later I will be going in the right way to the main door. Instead of going around.
Oh, dude, that is so great to hear. It's honestly like some sort of church when you go in. It's such a
Yeah, very likely, right? So.
A good friend of mine called Tim Hamill, who I do a load of recording with, and he's like the biggest Beatles and he's like a gear freak. And so I remember Eric brought Tim, and Eric was 6'6", and Tim is like 6'5", so they're both giants. And so Eric took Tim around the studio and showed him all the old reverb rooms and all of this, because Eric's been recording there. He'd been recording there for 50 years or something crazy. Or more, I don't know. So he'd seen all the changes, and he'd take us down to the cantina. They don't know him, and so I went with somebody who knew the old guard, way back. So it was a beautiful experience. And Tim, man, he took videos of it. And when I go to the studio, we talk often about when Eric took him around Abbey Road, because it's like a religious experience.
Absolutely.
That's, man, I'm telling you, it's a beautiful thing.
So hopefully this time will get me around. Otherwise, I need to call Sally or you or something.
We'll get you in.
And as I say before, and if the podcast become popular, and then they start, I think Google will start, YouTube will give you some money, or depending on the number of viewers and the number of hours and it's a combination of different things. If I generate the money or the book, I will donate on the money. I don't need the money. I have done well in my life. I will donate every single penny to a local hospital, or St. Jude's Hospital here in the United States. Music has given me so much satisfaction that I'm not doing this for the money. I mean, people like yourself giving me 2-3 hours of the time, and I'm going, number one. Number two, I'm not doing just that for myself, Steve. Let me explain. Let's say if down the road I happen to have the chance to talk to Eric Clapton, for example, right? He doesn't give any interviews and nothing like that. If I get a chance to, get a cup of coffee or interview him for an hour, it's 1% inside me will be, my ego will go to the roof, right? I interview this guy, but that's 1%. The other 99%, I will make a lot of people happy. If I interview Eric Clapton or Robert Fripp or Brian May or any of the famous people, 20,000, 30,000 people will see the interview, hear my accent, right? So I'm doing that for the rest of it, not for me. Hopefully eventually will die. The internet will stay, I suppose, and people can go back and say, who are the Pink Floyd guys, who are the Led Zeppelin, who are Alan Parsons and these guys. So I'm doing that for the rest.
That's what it's about, man. I'm telling you.
It's
something. Yeah, that's amazing.
All right, so let's go back. No, you turned 25, and despite any lack of a Western experience, you end up winning the role of Jesus. From thousands of people that audition. And I think I read somewhere that people call you the Son of God is Welsh.
Yeah, that was on a magazine. Yeah. Listen, man, it was a hell of a time, and again, looking back now, 25 years later, so I'm 51 now, so it's like half a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
Looking back, man, I think it was such a long shot. It was a crazy long shot.
Yeah.
And I could sing the role, and I looked, at the time I was not grey, and I had long hair, and I looked the Western idea of Jesus, I suppose. So I had the physical attributes going my way, and I could sing the role. But other than that, man, I had no acting experience, no experience really of how to handle a lead role, and it was a hell of a thing to do. But as I said earlier on, it was the biggest learning experience of my life. How to conduct yourself, how to work within a company. I'm lucky I've got, half a brain, and I like watching stuff, and I like listening to people and seeing how people interact. I'm very into the psychology of how it all works. And so, I had a few, and I tell you one thing I did have, I did martial arts as a kid.
Yep.
I said this to somebody the other day, and I did a lot of competition fighting, and I did it for years, I become good at it. But what it taught me was how to relax yourself, how to not freak out in any situation. And I remember the first night, I remember when I used to fight competitions a lot, my instructor Sparky and the other instructor John would just say, listen, just lean into it. Don't do it. Try and do as little as possible. Try and do nothing. Just react to whatever's coming, right? The punch or the kick. And it's the same. And the director Gail would say the same thing. Just do less, just react. So I remember on the opening night, in my mind, and it was terrifying. Don't get me wrong, Claudia. It was terrifying. And there was a lot of expectation, and it was a lot. But I remember just thinking, just like I went and did hundreds of competitions before, just be there and just be ready. And that's what I did. I kind of, instead of attacking it and trying too hard, I just kind of sat, kind of laid back into it and let everything else carry me along. And it bloody worked, So, and by the end of the run, I think I was doing less and less and less. And I was just kind of literally floating around the stage, singing high notes. A little bit more than that, but it was a hell of an experience. And one thing I'm glad, and people talk about the part, and there's that version from the Ahoy in Rotterdam online, which people like, and I like as well. When I look back at it, I think, wow, it doesn't even seem like me. It seems like somebody else walked into, had taken over me for a minute, and which I suppose is good, right? Because
absolutely,
transformed.
I tried to put myself in your shoes, and the amount of pressure that you could have on a daily basis. I mean, here's a day, right? Steve, this is Steve, right? Talking to your mom, you're relaxing, going to the theater, do your job, get crucified.
Yeah.
You go to an emotional state, and then you go back home, and then you are the same as Steve that before. It's how you manage the because then the play became very popular. You began to doing interviews. People were calling you, a magazine, picture, and eventually you need to become. You need to put yourself there, open up, and then you come home, and then you are the regular Steve. So how you manage?
I think just I've never been into kind of flashy things. It's never been my thing. I'm just into singing the best I can, writing the best songs, and trying to do the best I can. So I took that very seriously. I didn't drink for a year, I drank lots of water, kept myself fit, kept myself strong, ate the right food. It was like being some sort of athlete, and I took it super seriously, because I figured, it was lucky that it was a long shot that I got there. When I got there, I wasn't going to mess it up. So I just took it very, very seriously. And basically that year became about everything revolved around the show for me, and I was lucky in a position. I didn't have any kids at the time. I didn't have any other external kind of factors. So my girlfriend at the time, who was living with me in London, we just chilled out, man, and just took it easy. But it was tough. It was tough physically, not so much on the voice, because I was young and I took very good care of my voice. But physically, I was being thrown, all over the place. The show was extremely, it was an incredible version of the show. It was very bloody and very graphic. And at one point, I get whipped, and my hands were shackled to each side of the stage, and I was whipped. So physically, my body was in bits. I remember at one point I tore my scapula. I had to go but back then it was like the show must go on, get on, go for a massage and get on. It was that sort of thing. So it was such a learning experience on so many levels. It really was. But as I said, after that, then I was off, and then I was off and running. I was offered to go into Whistle Down the Wind that Andrew wrote with Jim Steinman, and I didn't want to do that. And I was offered to stay on in the show, and I didn't want to do that either. So I just wanted to go and do my own thing for a while, because I literally gave a year of my life and went, yeah, I'm going to give this 100%. But I knew what was coming next, and I never stand still. I just want to keep moving and keep creating stuff and making things.
I read somewhere that you went to 14 or 15 audition. How did you prepare, if any preparation to go for? Okay, here's a group of 1,000 people. To now we have 800 and 250, 25, and how you prepare to?
Well, I read
audition 1 to audition 3 and audition 5 and.
Well, I read lots of stuff. I tried to prepare myself. I tried to watch. This was pre-internet, so I had to go into the library and get stuff and films and read some books and watched Zeffirelli's, the Jesus of Nazareth a couple of times. Last Temptation of Christ had just come out. I remember watching that, thinking it was great. And the director at every audition, I think she was trying to not give me the role. She was trying to give me so much stuff to go away and practice that when I'd come back, she went, nah. So they tried throwing stuff at me, do this, do that. I remember I was singing on top of a piano one day, shouting and screaming. And then she'd say, go and think about this and look in a mirror and do this and do less and do this. So I'd literally go back, and in the intervening months, I would try and learn and try and, but but interestingly, I never went for any coaching. I never found an acting coach and went, hey, come and help me. And I kind of worked through it and did it. And then when I went back, I did it again and again and again until right at the last audition, they brought in the guy Zubin Vala. It was his first audition. It was my 15th or whatever. It was his first. And there was a confrontation scene around the table. And I remember they brought him on, so he's going to be Judas. And I remember he put his hands on me and I grabbed him. We had a little fight. And I was like, yeah, this is on, man. And then afterwards, I said to him, I think we got the gig. And he was like, how do you know? I said, I just know, man. I just know we've got it. Because the chemistry worked and everything worked. And they went, yeah, we got it. And that was it. And then I remember my agent, Johnny, called me that afternoon and said, you've got it. And my uncle Tony, who passed away a few years ago, he used to, because I had no money, I was, in bands, and I was working as a piano removal man. And so my uncle used to send me money so I could get the train up to London. I used to stay with him. And he was the first person I called and said, Tony, I've got the gig.
Wow.
And he was like, oh, brilliant. Let's go to Soho. He used to drink at a place called the French House in Soho, which is a brilliant pub. We used to know the guy who ran it, a guy called Gaston. And if you go in there now, there's a bust of Gaston's face, this old guy. And so we went there and got absolutely drunk out of our brains, laughing our heads off. Brilliant.
Good for you, man. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was that. That was a hell of a journey, man. It was a hell of a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether you are, a Catholic, Christian, Jewish, seeing you on a stage is very powerful. I mean, the music, the lighting, what you're saying, what you're singing it's a very powerful image for anybody. As I say, whether you are Christian, Catholic, Jewish, or whatever religion do you believe on or not.
And that's what my dad, my dad was brought up Roman Catholic, and when he came to see the show the first time, I went for a beer, he was like, geez, how do you do that? And I was like, I don't know. It was just one of those things. I think it was just one of those things, man. I think it was one of those, I needed to do it in this time around, this incarnation.
Yeah.
When people talk about it now, some people say, are you bored of talking about it? I'm like, no, man, because I'm so proud of what I've done. In fact, everything I've done in music, I haven't done anything for the money. I've never done anything for anything other than doing it from my, from my heart, everything. So if people don't like it, that's one thing. I don't care about that. But
Mm.
People can't say it's, you know, it's shit, because I know I've just given, and and as a result, I'm not embarrassed about anything I've done. I wouldn't go, oh no, don't look at that. Because my daughter, when she was in school, she was doing drama when she's a couple of years ago. She's in a bigger college now, and she came home and said, Dad, we're going to study you in drama. We're studying you in this, in drama, you know. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's weird. I said, but how does that make you feel? She was like, I don't know. She said, have you done anything terrible? I said, what do you mean? Have you done anything in music that's rubbish? I went, well, no. You might not like it, but none of it's rubbish. You know, it's all of a certain intention, and I put as much love into it as I can in the moment. So, but I love that when she came home and said, we're studying you.
It's amazing, huh? Yeah, amazing.
It's crazy, yeah, it's weird.
And I think I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly, but Gitsimani son, there I saw the other day when I was putting the question together. Many people say that your performance has the best performer ever seen on any of the plays or videos that people upload to YouTube and so on. So forth. It's very, very, very powerful. Of course,
Well,
never
it's
seen. I
nice.
was living here in the United States, so I never saw you perform. I have seen the videos, and it's amazing, man. So
Thanks, man. I think to be in a conversation with any of those cats, with Ted, Neely, and Gillan, who else played it? Johnny Farnham. Johnny Farnham's one of the best singers ever to have walked the earth. So to be in that conversation is some serious, cool things. So yeah, listen, I tried my best, and that's all I could give. And that was it. That's all I could do at the time. Was what I did. But that came after the performance. That came after. So that finished in '96. That was about 2004. So it was about 20 years ago. So it was a while after. But yeah, and I'd had time to think. But that performance that is on the internet now, I'd had time to think. I've said this before in other interviews, but my mum had died. One of my kids was born. So I'd seen a lot of life come and go between the two performances. So there was more to kind of dig into, and there was more to kind of there was more vantage points, you know. And I think it shows in my voice as well. There was some definite blue. It was bluer, it was darker. And yeah, I think, you know, to sing you know, from your soul, if you like. I think it's good if you've seen a bit of life. You can express that somehow.
did you ever have like because you get so deep into the role, and with the crucifixion, which is very important for so many people, you have any like a sort of out of body experience?
Yeah.
Or weird stuff? Because, you know, in Jungian terms, right, Jesus Christ is a very powerful you know, archetype, part of, you know, our collective unconscious, right? So it's, whether you believe or not, there's a lot of books that there Jesus didn't exist, or the Jewish killed Jesus, or Christians, some believe, some don't, whatever that belief that people have, right? So, and I have my own belief as well. It's a very powerful image. Nobody can, you know, deny that, right? So it's any weird experience that you have performing the role, or
yes.
Yeah.
So now you're in my world now. This the Jungian stuff is right up my street. So
yep.
I was aware of that stuff because I love reading Jung, and I love reading all, you know, because his synchronicity thing was big. It was a big motivator for him. So I'm doing the part about 6 months into the role, and the crucifixion scene comes, and sometimes I noticed that sometimes the cast is on and sometimes it's off. And what I mean by that is sometimes everyone is moving like a well-oiled machine, so it becomes so on the money, so slick, and it's incredible. You know, everyone's great, because they spent a year casting it. Everyone's fantastic, and everyone can do everybody else's role. It's not like they cast me for Jesus. There were like 6 or 7 guys who could have and did play that role. So but sometimes it's a well-oiled machine. And this one night, it was a well-oiled machine. So during the crucifixion scene, which was super powerful, because they nailed me to the cross on the stage, and then they raised the cross. so I come up. It was such a stark, and I'd been beaten before, and I was full of blood. It was just really, really, really brutal. So I'm given the lines, "Who is my mother? Where's my mother?" I'm looking out into the auditorium. I've told this the story a few times, and the crown of thorns is on my head, and they've got little sachets of blood that kind of, when it's squeezed onto your head, it kind of drips down like that. And sometimes it missed, and they were designed to miss my eyes, but sometimes they would kind of roll into my eyes. And this one night, and you can't do anything, you can't take your hand off and rub it because it's supposed to be nailed on, right? So you're blinking the blood out your eyes. I was blinking the blood out, and I blinked, and as I opened my eyes, I saw what I thought was about 20 feet suspended in midair, like this huge demon's face, right? And the main features of this demon's face were the eyes and these sharp pointed teeth. And I remember thinking, I'm tripping. Somebody slipped me a Mickey Finn in my drink, and I'm actually tripping here. And I'm blinking away, and it must have lasted for about 5 or 6 seconds, and then it kind of dissipated, and it went. Now, it shook me, right? I didn't tell anybody. I told my girlfriend when I came home, and I remember thinking, and then doubting what I saw, and then reframing it as it must have been the blood, and it must have been this. But I saw a demon's face. So years later, I'm learning about the history of the Lyceum Theatre, where we were in the West End of London. Firstly, where it's at, it was a few hundred yards from the plague pits where they used to bury the bodies during the plague. It's a very old, reputedly haunted theatre. I'm very interested in the idea of psychogeography, the idea that the sense of place and the history would inform what goes on in the now, And I learned about Henry Irving, who was the actor manager of the Lyceum Theatre. And his manager there was Bram Stoker, who apparently was inspired to write Dracula by Henry Irving's Faust. And they were really good friends. There was a lot of love and mutual respect between them. And I think, if I'm right, the first place that Dracula ever played was at the Lyceum Theatre. So I think what happened was the genius loci, or the kind of energy, or the spirit of the place, whatever was there originally, had such a strong imprint of the vampire, the sharp pointed teeth and the eyes, the fiery eyes, that during my Jungian archetypal moment of doing this on a stage in front of 2,000 people, some sort of veil was lifted where maybe, all this is all speculation, either I was tripping, either it was blood in my eye, or it might have been some sort of veil lifted during a trance-like moment where, in olden days, being on stage would have been a shamanic practice anyway, right? The masks and taking on. But I was embodying, whether you believe Christ existed or not, you've got 2,000 years of layer upon layer upon layer of love and whatever, people's thoughts are about Jesus. We've got 2,000 years of projected archetypal drawn from the Jungian collective. And I think in that moment, I saw something that either played out there before or was still trapped in the place, So I think that, yeah.
Wow, it's amazing. You mentioned, I think, psychogeography. I don't know if you are familiar with the lyrics of Peter Gavill's Salisbury Hill.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
I will send you a link for you to see what it's about. And at the time that Peter Gabriel decided to leave Genesis and be on his own, he didn't have any money, and he went to that particular hill, which is about 10-15 minutes from Bath, from his studio, the Real World Studio, which I'm going to be, one of the reasons that I'm going to London is to visit the place and so forth. And it's a lot of Peter Gabriel too have a lot of weird experiences, quote unquote weird mystical experiences, and it's very interesting stuff as well. So.